Family, on tonight, I would like to continue our discussion from this past Monday evening. In our last session, we talked about the fact that Satan is deceptive, which gives credence to the idea of proving or testing things, as mentioned in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 21. On tonight, I'd like to show you some practical examples as to how the devil works to deceive us. As believers, sometimes we might not have our eyes on what's going on, or our ears may not be aware of what's happening around us. We can be so immersed into things that, relatively speaking, are not important, but are distractions nonetheless, that we miss what's happening right in front of us. It has been my unfortunate experience to be around Christians arguing about things like how much money to spend on the lawnmower, what color paint to put on the wall in a particular room. I'm not talking about folks just having differences. I'm talking about Christians having passionate discussions on such issues. Or two sisters fighting in the kitchen about how one has cut the other's cake. Or meetings discussing things like, are we going to have one meat or two meats at the church fellowship meal? All while we are immersed in this type of foolishness, these trivial matters, this outright nonsense, the devil is deceiving the hearts of many and is also trying to infiltrate into the church the minds of God's people, his ideologies that are inconsistent with godliness. Allow me to give you examples tonight by way of terms that are used, trends that we experience, and thoughts that are shared to help us understand how the devil works. Let's first talk about terms the devil uses. In society, we hear things like gender affirming care. Doesn't that sound nice? Gender affirming care. It basically means the idea of transitioning from one sex or gender to another. But by saying gender affirming care, that term softens the otherwise shock of saying sex change. Or what about women's reproductive rights? When you put that reproductive rights on there, it makes it so much more palatable than to talk about aborting or killing a child. What about the term homophobia? In order to get more people to embrace the concept of the LGBTQIA plus community, if you are against them, don't stand for what they stand for, by labeling something as homophobic or someone as homophobic, oh, it helps to shame the person for not embracing the concept. What about people living together? People used to say they're shacking up, living in sin. But what does the devil use? The term cohabitation. That softens the effect and impact of sin. When we talk about the role of men as heads of the family, they're heads in the church, they call it male patriotic microaggression. Companies even have seminars, and HR people in some companies even have discussions about the patriarchal microaggression of men. Doesn't mean that they're not needed discussions on the abuse of authority and power that some men take. But this is an attack on the role that God has given to men. The devil uses terms to try to deceive the hearts of people. He also uses trends. For example, in our government, they legalize same-sex marriage. Now, to the first generation of people hearing that, it is shocking. It's something that is devastating to embrace as a reality. Same-sex marriage is legal. But the second generation to hear that, it's normalized. In fact, many young people today, even if they're not practicing or feeling same-sex attraction, will say to parents or grandparents, "Why do you all care if they love each other?" Just because something is legal does not make it moral. A part of Satan's trend is even to affect us at work. A buzzword at companies is the word diversity. They love diversity, not just racial diversity, but they have diversity even in people's ideologies or viewpoints. A job will tell you we can't focus on God because out of diversity we have to be fair. And it's not fair to atheists. It's not fair to Jews. It's not fair to Muslims. So we cannot affirm a Christian viewpoint because we are a diverse company. In elementary schools, we see these trends. They focus on something that's called inclusion. That means everybody has equal access and every point of view and every concept is okay because we don't want to make anyone feel bad. And I know factually that there are school districts that will not stand for moral positions because they said it just costs too much to fight these immoral institutions who go around suing and making claims, and that it takes away from paying teachers and buying books and providing security. So if a student wants to be called a her, even though he's clearly a he, or if he wants to be called it, or a teacher wants to be called they and them, let's just be inclusive. In higher education, we see this. They believe in things like logic or reason, so they say. And they say there has to be a rationale for everything. That if you cannot rationalize something with logic and reason, how can you believe it? Talk about things like the origins of life and the origins of the universe. It's amazing that people with education think that it is okay to teach that we evolved from monkeys or that we've come because of the Big Bang Theory. What I find to be interesting about this is how Christians don't stand against these things. I remember when my children were in school and they were going to teach evolution, spoke with the science teacher. And what was interesting is he shared with me that in 20-something years of teaching evolution, he had never had one parent to ever challenge or even question his teachings. We wonder why our children are not interested in God. When they hear about him, maybe a couple of hours on Sunday, maybe an hour or so in midweek Bible study, but yet they're in a world where the trend is to indoctrinate them with the devil's ideology. No wonder they get 18 and they're no longer interested in church. The entertainment industry uses this concept of creative license or artistic expression as a means of getting over Satan's deceptive agenda. You wonder why there's so much vulgarity in music and immorality on the big screen and on the small screen? Because they call it artistic expression. Do you know there was a famous rap group that was sued and filed a suit and went all the way to the Supreme Court? And because of creative licensing and First Amendment rights, vulgarity won the day. Even in many of our churches, we see this compromise on what is right, on morality. I've heard preachers say things like, people deal with enough mess and turmoil in the world. I don't want them to feel judged. This is a no judgment zone, and anything to get another person in the pew. It's all about entertaining. It's not about upstanding the standards of truth. You know, truth will set you free, but that's if you want to be free. Because truth will hurt you sometimes. Truth will make you uncomfortable. Truth will challenge you. Truth will slap you in the face. Paul says, "Am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth?" Not only does Satan work to deceive by way of terms and by way of trends, he works to deceive by way of thoughts. Here are some thoughts that you hear that you need to be aware of. And while we may want to take notice of how these things affect us, we may also want to take notice of how more impressionable people like children or grandchildren receive these things, or people who are not as strong in their faith. For example, a popular phrase that you hear amongst people today, especially young people, is be your authentic self. Doesn't that sound good? And it's just as deceptive as can be. Be your authentic self means that whatever you are, whatever you believe, however you want to live, be you. The problem with that is that we are not called to be our authentic selves. We are called to be like Christ. The authentic self is the reason why we don't glory and honor God in our fleshly state and in our fleshly ways. And that's why we put on Christ, so that we can move beyond the temptations and weaknesses of the flesh. Another thought these days is that truth is relative. In other words, truth is not absolute. It is just dependent on your beliefs and understanding. So what you believe is fine. What I believe is fine. The Bible says in John 8:32, you shall know the truth. There's no such thing as my truth and your truth. No, there's the truth. Here's another thought today. Organized religion is corrupt. Look at the Catholic Church. Look at the sex scandals in churches. Look at embezzlement in churches. Look at wars that have been fought, all in the name of religion. And so organized religion is corrupt. Well, the problem is that people look at religion as an institution and don't understand that it's a relationship. Not only that, religion is not about those who have achieved perfection. It's about those who are serving the perfect God. Here's one people say, do not judge. Oh, the Bible says do not judge. It's a passage taken out of context. Because the Bible is telling us not to be biased, not to be prejudiced, not to be unfair in our dealings with others. See, when people say do not judge, that means don't hold me to any standards of morality. In reality, we need to judge because the judge is to have a standard. For example, if a spouse came home and saw their spouse in bed with someone else, would they say, well, I can't judge? If someone were to steal your identity and you go to court and you get a chance to make a victim impact statement at their sentencing, would you say to them, well, I can't judge you? The Bible says in John 7:24, judge ye righteous judgment. And here's one. God is in your heart. People love to say that because it means that I don't have to be accountable to a church or a fellowship of believers, that I have the right to conceptualize God in my own way, in my own heart. You know what the problem is with that? The Bible teaches us in Jeremiah 17:9 that the heart is deceitful. The Bible teaches that sin begins in the heart. It's the heart that's corrupt. So if God is in your heart, oh, there's a problem there. Beloved, I want us to be aware of these terms, of these trends, of these thoughts. Again, there are impressionable minds. There are people who are young, people who are not as strong in their faith. And just when we think we are so strong that we can weather the storm of Satan and we're stronger than these terms, these trends, and these thoughts, don't forget that he's the master deceiver. And he has a plan that he's working. Our job is to make sure that his plan does not work. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.